Sharon announced it during Sunday dinner, Brenda and Connie already smirking from the patio. "Dave, I think we should open up the marriage." My fork clattered against the plate, the sound echoing the sudden hollowness inside me. Her eyes, bright with a predatory glee, met mine across the table. "You look surprised," she purred. "Didn't you want freedom?" I remember the conversations that ran through our house, even when I wasn't directly involved. Sharon's friends Brenda, Connie, Patty were frequent visitors. Their talks often circled back to the same themes: the dullness of routines, the predictable nature of long-term commitments. I heard phrases like stifled potential and missed chances filtering from the kitchen or the living room. Sharon, usually quiet during these exchanges, started to echo their sentiments, first subtly, then with increasing directness. The air around her shifted, thick with a restlessness I hadn't recognized before. The proposal came over Sunday dinner, the remnants of roast chicken and potatoes still on our plates. Brenda and Connie were outside on the patio, their laughter floating in through the screen door. Sharon looked across the table at me, her gaze steady. "Dave," she started, her voice unnervingly calm. "I've been thinking. I think we should try an open marriage." The words hit like a physical blow. My fork clattered against the ceramic plate, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, a familiar sensation of something breaking. Sharon just watched me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. I pushed back from the table. The urge to respond, to shout, to simply walk out, was strong. Instead, I stood, turned, and walked out the back door, past Brenda and Connie, who had gone quiet, and into the backyard. The cool evening air did little to settle the turmoil. My mind raced, trying to grasp the implications, the sudden, fundamental shift she was proposing. I walked the perimeter of the yard twice, 3 times, analyzing, strategizing, before the anger slowly solidified into something colder, more practical. When I re-entered the house, my demeanor had changed. The shock was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost surgical control. Sharon was still at the table, picking at a loose thread on her napkin. Her friends had disappeared. "All right," I said, my voice level. "If this is what you want, then we will have rules." I laid them out, not as suggestions, but as conditions. 1. No bringing others into our home. This house remains ours alone. 2. Discretion. Our private arrangements are not for public consumption. 3. No emotional attachments. Physical encounters only. 4. Absolute transparency on health and safety. I watched her face as I spoke, looking for any sign of hesitation. There was none. She nodded, her eyes already distant, already past the present moment, consumed by the possibilities I had just outlined. The next morning, the signs were immediate. I watched her from the kitchen as she downloaded multiple dating applications onto her phone. Her fingers moved with a practiced ease I found unsettling. Later, I overheard her calling Brenda, her voice hushed but excitable. "It's done," she whispered. He agreed. Everything's changed. Her enthusiasm was palpable, almost sickeningly so. That week, at the office, I observed Sharon making subtle overtures towards Chad, one of our younger colleagues. Their interactions, usually confined to work-related matters, became punctuated by longer glances, hushed conversations by the water cooler. I noticed her hand linger on his arm once, a fleeting touch that lasted a fraction of a second too long. The message, though unspoken, was clear. She was free, and she was letting him know. By Thursday afternoon, the evidence was undeniable. I saw her packing a small overnight bag, a toothbrush, a change of clothes, small toiletries. Her movements were precise, efficient. She hummed a tune I didn't recognize. The anticipation was thick in the air around her. A tangible thing. As she prepared to leave that evening, Dressed in something I hadn't seen her wear in years, she paused by the door. I was in the living room, watching the local news. She looked at me, a quick, almost defiant glance. I returned her gaze, offering nothing but a long, emotionless look. It was not an accusation, nor an invitation. It was simply an acknowledgement of the new reality she had chosen. Later, I knew she met Brenda and the others at the Old Mill Bar, a place popular with the after-work crowd. Chad joined them within the hour. My investigations confirmed this through several sources. Not long after, a bartender I knew from there told me Sharon and Chad left together, heading in the direction of the new Comfort Inn by the highway. There was no need for further details. The destination spoke for itself. She returned home sometime after 3 in the morning. The house was dark, quiet. I was in the study, asleep on the worn leather couch. The overhead light in the hallway clicked on, then off. Her footsteps were light as she passed the study door, heading towards the bedroom. A minute later, she was back, standing in the doorway. "Dave," she whispered. "Are you coming to bed?" I opened my eyes, the room still dim. "No," I said, my voice flat. "I'm staying here. We had an agreement, Sharon. Our bed is ours. Other arrangements do not involve shared sleeping quarters." She paused, then let out a small, derisive sound, a soft humph. "Sulking. Are we?" she muttered, though I heard it clearly. I watched her retreat, her silhouette disappearing back into the darkened hallway. A moment later, I heard the mattress creak as she got into her empty side of the bed. The silence that followed was heavy, permanent. For the first few weeks, Sharon kept her new activities somewhat contained. She limited her date nights to Fridays and Saturdays, occasionally heading out after dinner, returning before dawn. I noted the pattern, the quiet departure, the even quieter return. It was a conscious effort, I assumed, to maintain some semblance of normalcy, or at least to avoid outright confrontation during the work week. My own routine had shifted. The marital bed became a place I no longer occupied. I found the guest room adequate, or sometimes the couch in the study provided sufficient rest. The absence of my presence in our shared bed was a deliberate choice, a physical manifestation of the boundaries she had drawn and I had reinforced. The house became a space of parallel lives, rather than intertwined ones. The children, observant as children often are, began to pick up on the change. 8-year-old Lily started asking, "Daddy, why don't you sleep in your room anymore?" 12-year-old Mark would just watch us, his eyes thoughtful, taking in the quiet meals, the lack of casual touch, the stiff politeness that had replaced easy conversation. I offered vague explanations, focusing on work or needing a quiet space, knowing they saw through the thin veneer. A few weeks in, Sharon confronted me in the kitchen one Tuesday morning, her voice edged with frustration. "Dave," she said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "You're being ridiculous. This aloofness, this cold shoulder, it's not fair. What happened to us?" I looked up from my coffee, my gaze steady. "What happened to us, Sharon, is what you wanted to happen. My agreement was made under duress, as I recall. There wasn't a choice in the matter, only a negotiation of terms." My words were calm, devoid of shouting, but carried a weight I intended. Her face tightened. "That's not fair. You agreed." "I did," I conceded. "And part of that agreement, though unstated, was my right to manage the consequences. And one of those consequences is that I will not be intimate with you. Not now. Not as long as you are engaging in this new lifestyle. I will not put my health at risk." The words were delivered plainly, factually. There was no anger, only the cold logic of self-preservation. The accusation, delivered so clinically, struck her. I saw a flicker of hurt in her eyes, a brief moment of vulnerability. She straightened, then laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You're overreacting, Dave. Seriously. This is just typical male insecurity." She dismissed my concern, her face quickly hardening, reconstructing her defensive facade. The moment of vulnerability was gone, replaced by the familiar conviction of her own righteousness. Her social life, unburdened by my objections, flourished. She spoke frequently of feeling liberated, of rediscovering herself. Her voice carried a new lightness, a sense of adventure I hadn't heard in years. It was, she often said to her friends over the phone, empowering. While Sharon explored her newfound freedom, I began my own quiet work. The financial statements became a new focus. I noticed subtle shifts. More frequent purchases of new clothing, dinners out that weren't accounted for as girls' night, a growing tab at the local salon. I started a mental ledger, then transferred it to a small, hidden notebook. The numbers, though not yet alarming, were consistent, reflecting a lifestyle beyond our agreed budget. The car, our shared family vehicle, also became an object of scrutiny. Each Sunday morning, while Sharon was still asleep, I would walk out to the garage, check the odometer, and record the exact mileage in my journal. I cross-referenced it with her stated destinations, her supposed visits to friends, her errands. The discrepancies were often minor, a few extra miles here or there, but they accumulated, painting a picture of movement beyond her stated activities. My private journal, initially a sporadic record of our increasingly separate lives, became a daily practice. I documented her departures, her estimated times of return, the actual times, any overheard phone calls, any unusual behavior. It was a factual record, stripped of emotion, built on observation, a log of events. One evening, after the children were in bed, I sat at my laptop, staring at the search bar. My fingers typed out the words, Divorce Proceedings, Michigan. Then, Marital Asset Division, Michigan. I spent an hour reading, absorbing the cold, legal definitions of what was mine, what was hers, what was shared. It was a contingency plan, a quiet acknowledgement of the path we were likely on, even if she refused to see it. Sharon's friends continued to laud her choices. Brenda, Connie, and Patty's voices, often loud on speakerphone, offered endless affirmations. You go, girl. About time you put yourself first. You deserve to be happy. Their praise, I observed, fed her resolve, reinforcing her narrative of self-liberation. I maintained my poker face throughout. When Sharon would try to engage me in conversation about her day, about the children, about anything that might touch on our crumbling marriage, I offered short, clipped responses, devoid of warmth. My face remained unreadable, my eyes revealing nothing. I offered no openings for discussion, no invitations for reconciliation. Occasionally, I would catch a glimpse of something in her eyes, a fleeting moment of what might have been guilt, a brief crack in her confident facade. She would look at me, then quickly away, her expression hardening again. The thought, whatever it was quickly pushed aside, replaced by the demands of her own desires. The initial restraint Sharon had shown in her new lifestyle quickly eroded. What began as Friday and Saturday night, excursions soon bled into weeknights. Tuesdays became girls' night, which often meant a late return, sometimes well past midnight. Wednesdays occasionally became dinner with a friend, which also extended into the early hours. The frequency of her absences increased, her justifications becoming more casual, less convincing. I started noticing small items appearing around the house. A delicate silver bracelet on her dresser. A new, expensive scarf draped over a chair. A small, intricate ceramic bird on her bedside table. These weren't items I had bought for her, nor were they things she typically purchased for herself. They were small, uncharacteristic gifts, implying new connections, new benefactors. I made a mental note of each one, noting the date they appeared. My review of our joint bank account statements became a nightly ritual after the children were asleep. I scrutinized every transaction, every debit, every transfer. It wasn't long before I flagged several instances of unexplained financial activity. Small cash withdrawals, sometimes $200, sometimes 3, from ATMs I didn't recognize as being on her usual routes. Digital transfers to accounts I couldn't identify, labeled with vague descriptions. The amounts were not large enough to trigger immediate alarm, but their regularity and lack of explanation were significant. I printed the statements, highlighting each suspicious entry. Sharon's phone became an extension of her new life. I observed her clutching it, her thumb always moving, often late at night. The glow of the screen would illuminate her face from the living room couch, where she often stayed after I had retreated to the guest room. She took calls in hushed tones, often walking out to the patio or into the garage, her voice a low murmur, careful not to be overheard. The discreetness was as telling as the activity itself. One Sunday morning, while she was still asleep, I slipped out to the garage. Under the rear bumper of her car, a small magnetic GPS tracker clicked into place. It was designed to be virtually undetectable, powered by a long-life battery. The device connected to an app on my own phone, giving me real-time location data. It was a step I hadn't taken lightly, but the need for objective verification had become paramount. With the GPS data now flowing in, I began to systematically compile a detailed timeline. On one side of a ledger, I meticulously recorded Sharon's stated plans: going to Brenda's, shopping in Ann Arbor, meeting Connie for coffee. On the other side, I logged the actual movements provided by the GPS. Addresses, times of arrival, times of departure. The discrepancies were often stark, revealing rendezvous points far from her stated locations. The ledger grew daily, a cold, hard document of deceit. Social media, too, became a source of information. Sharon's friends, particularly Brenda, were less discreet than Sharon herself. I found myself occasionally checking their public profiles. Screenshots filled a hidden folder on my computer. Brenda's posts about living your best life with pictures of Sharon, laughing a little too intimately with various men in dimly lit bars. Connie's comments, "You deserve this, girl." Under photos I knew were taken on weeknights, Sharon claimed to be at home. The evidence was anecdotal, but it built a picture. My children's well-being became the anchor of my resolve. I saw their confusion, their quiet sadness over the changing dynamic in our home. Lily, sometimes asking me to read her an extra story just because. Mark, spending more time in his room, less time engaging with us. Their emotional stability, their sense of home, was being undermined. My actions, I reasoned, were for them. The attorney's office was discreet, located on the second floor of an older building downtown. Mr. Henderson was a man of quiet demeanor and sharp intellect. He listened without interruption as I laid out my observations, my suspicions. "Mr. Peterson," he said, adjusting his glasses, "what you've described suggests grounds for divorce. However, in cases involving infidelity, especially concerning asset division and child custody, concrete evidence is paramount. Documentation, timelines, financial records, digital footprints. These are your best allies." He handed me a list of documents to gather. Following his advice, I obtained copies of Sharon's recent work schedule and attendance records from our shared employer. It was a simple request to HR, citing a need for clarity on shared projects, a perfectly legitimate reason. I then cross-referenced these with my GPS data and my journal entries, verifying the hours she claimed to be at work against her actual movements. The system was now complete, triangulating her activities. Sharon, perhaps emboldened by her new lifestyle, started making veiled references to her active social life in my presence. "Had a really interesting conversation last night," she'd say over breakfast, or "someone at the bar was telling me about." She never elaborated, never gave specifics, just dropped hints, testing the waters, gauging my reaction. My response remained consistent, a calculated, distant politeness. "That's interesting, Sharon," I would say, or indeed. My face remained unreadable, my eyes revealing nothing of the growing dossier in my study. the silent accumulation of facts that would one day lay bare the full extent of her choices. My attorney, Mr. Henderson, connected me with a private investigator by the same last name, a Mr. Henderson, who specialized in discreet marital surveillance. He's the best in the business, my attorney assured me. Leaves no stone unturned. The initial consultation was brief and to the point. I laid out everything: my journal entries, the odometer readings, the bank statements, the GPS data, the social media screenshots, and my suspicions about Chad. I provided him with Sharon's work schedule, her car's make and model, even the typical routes she took. Focus on the weeknights, the girls' nights, I instructed. And Chad. Chad is important. Mr. Henderson, the PI, began his work immediately. His reports started filtering in, first as brief updates, then as more substantial summaries. He confirmed Sharon's girls' nights out often involved more than just her female friends. One Tuesday evening, his surveillance led him 40 miles west of our town, to a quiet restaurant on the edge of a different suburb. There, his camera captured Sharon laughing, a little too intimately, with Chad across a dimly lit table. The photos were clear, time-stamped, undeniable. The surveillance continued that night. The PI followed their vehicle from the restaurant to a small, unassuming motel just off the interstate. He documented their entry into a specific room, the lights going out, and their separate exits the following morning. The sequence of photos, taken from a discreet distance, left no room for interpretation. Each image was a precise point in time, a factual record of her actions. Subsequent reports from the PI expanded the scope of his findings. Chad was not the only one. He identified several other individuals Sharon was meeting, some through dating apps, others through her extended social circle. Each liaison was meticulously documented. Dates, times, locations. The patterns were clear, the frequency increasing. It was a methodical dissection of her active social life. More troubling were the revelations about her conduct during work hours. The PI's investigation revealed instances of Sharon using company time for personal errands that often led to rendezvous points. Lunch breaks extended far beyond the allotted hour, sometimes stretching into the afternoon. Her company car, meant for business travel, was regularly diverted to locations consistent with her private engagements. Even her company phone, issued for professional communication, showed patterns of calls and texts aligning with her personal liaisons. She was leveraging her employer's resources for her own pursuits. Finally, a thick envelope arrived from Mr. Henderson, the PI. Inside was a comprehensive report. It contained dozens of photographs, short video clips, detailed logs of her movements, financial summaries of her spending during these excursions, and a full breakdown of her interactions. It was a dossier, meticulously compiled, leaving no stone unturned. I sat in my study late into the night, reviewing the report. The photos showed Sharon in various states of intimacy, not just with Chad but with others. The videos, though grainy, captured subtle gestures, touches, expressions that spoke volumes. I went through page by page, cross-referencing against my own journal, my own timelines. Every transgression was noted, every lie laid bare. The report confirmed my suspicions, but also unearthed depths of betrayal I had only speculated about. The most jarring aspect was the evidence of her emotional depth with Chad. The PI's observations described conversations, prolonged periods of shared laughter, and gestures of tenderness that went beyond mere physical encounters. This contradicted her initial assurances, her dismissals of any emotional involvement. It was a breach of a rule that was, perhaps, the most important of all. I saw the specific lies she had told me, not just about her whereabouts, but about the nature of her relationships. The casual dates were anything but. The friends were lovers. The freedom she sought was built on a deliberate network of deceit. I meticulously identified every breach of the specific rules I had laid out. No bringing others into our home she hadn't. But she'd spent our money to take them elsewhere. Discretion her friends' social media posts. Her own casual mentions had undermined that. No emotional attachments, the report detailed otherwise. Absolute transparency on health and safety, a laughable notion given the frequency and variety of her liaisons. A surge of bitter, quiet vindication washed over me. It was not joy, but a cold, hard satisfaction. The emotional turmoil of the past months had been replaced by the quiet certainty of facts. Outwardly, I remained composed, but inside, the groundwork for action was now complete. I spent the next morning carefully digitizing every document, every photo, every video. I backed them up to multiple cloud storage accounts and encrypted drives. The evidence was secured, immutable, ready for use. Then, I picked up the phone. "Mr. Henderson," I said to my attorney, "I have the report. I believe we have everything we need to proceed." I scheduled an urgent follow-up meeting for the following day, ready to strategize the next phase. The meeting with Mr. Henderson, my attorney, felt less like a consultation and more like a strategy session. I laid the thick binder on his desk. He opened it, flipping through the pages, his expression unreadable. He spent a full hour reviewing the PI reports, the photographs, the meticulously compiled timelines. When he finally looked up, his gaze was firm. "Dave," he said, "this is overwhelming. You have a very strong case for divorce, and a significant advantage for sole custody. Should you choose to pursue it?" The confirmation was not a triumph, but a quiet, bitter acknowledgement of the path ahead. I spent the next 2 days meticulously planning the confrontation. I didn't want a scene at home, not with the children present. A neutral location was essential. I chose a quiet public coffee shop, one far enough from our neighborhood to ensure privacy, but visible enough to deter any theatrical outbursts. I prepared a concise, bullet-pointed summary: the dates, the locations, the names. It was a factual indictment, stripped of emotion. When Sharon arrived, she looked tired, a little wary. I had simply sent her a text, asking to meet. "What's this about, Dave?" she asked, her voice tinged with impatience. I didn't respond immediately. I slid the binder across the table, open to the first page, a clear, time-stamped photo of her and Chad entering the motel. "This is about accountability, Sharon," I stated, my voice even, calm, "and the consequences of your choices." She stared at the photograph, then at me. Her face went pale. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" she stammered, her voice already beginning to waver. "This isn't what it looks like. This is... You're twisting things." She tried to grasp for explanations, her eyes darting from the image to mine. I moved the binder, flipping to the next page. September 14th, 11:32 p.m. The Comfort Inn on Highway 12. And here, I flipped again. September 28th, the Red Roof Inn, room 207. I continued. Each date, each time, each location, a precise, irrefutable fact. Here are the photos of you with Mark Jennings, October 5th. And here, the bank statements showing the withdrawals you made to cover those expenses. I laid out the evidence with a cold, logical precision, leaving no room for denial. Her composure visibly shattered. The color drained from her face. Her hands began to tremble as she leafed through the pages. The confident facade, the liberated woman, crumbled under the weight of the undeniable proof. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "I am filing for divorce, Sharon," I stated, my voice still calm, but firm. "This evidence provides the rationale. There will be no negotiation on this. It's done." Her initial shock quickly morphed into a furious outburst. "You spy. You paranoid bastard. How could you do this to me? You betrayed my trust." Her voice rose, drawing a few curious glances from other patrons. "This is sick, Dave. Absolutely sick." I remained unruffled. "Betrayed your trust, Sharon?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet cutting through her anger. You initiated this open marriage. You set the terms. I simply monitored your adherence to them. And you consistently, repeatedly, and thoroughly breached every single one of those terms. The evidence is here. It speaks for itself. I gestured to the binder, still open on the table. She stood abruptly, overturning her coffee cup with a clatter. "You'll regret this, Dave," she hissed, her eyes brimming with angry tears. She stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving the binder and the shattered remnants of her denial behind. I watched her go, then called Mr. Henderson. "Proceed with the papers," I said. Immediately. That evening, I sat the children down. They sensed the gravity in my tone. "Mommy and I are going to get a divorce," I told them, keeping my voice steady. "We won't be living together anymore." Lily's eyes welled up. Mark looked down at his hands, his face a mask of confusion and deep trouble. It was hard to see their hurt, the unraveling of their world. But this, I reasoned, was a pain that would eventually heal. The alternative, a life of quiet deceit and emotional sterility, would have festered. "This is not your fault," I assured them, holding Lily close. "It's a grown-up problem, and we'll both still be here for you. Always. This home will still be your home, and we'll keep things as stable as possible." Their small, troubled faces were a stark reminder of life's costly choices. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Sharon, as expected, retained her own legal counsel. Her initial strategy, relayed through her attorney, was to challenge the legitimacy of my evidence, claiming invasion of privacy and a breach of our open marriage agreement. They argued that because the marriage was open, my surveillance was an act of malice, not a pursuit of truth. My attorney, Mr. Henderson, countered swiftly. He filed a motion introducing the comprehensive PI findings as a core exhibit. The documents were presented, not as products of marital malice, but as necessary evidence to establish the true nature of Sharon's activities and their impact on marital assets and child welfare. The court was receptive. As the legal proceedings moved forward, the truth of Sharon's double life began to circulate, first as whispers, then as undeniable facts, through our social and professional circles. Sharon's friends Brenda, Connie, and Patty were forced to confront the stark reality of her choices. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their unwavering support had begun to waver. The lavish praise was replaced by uncomfortable silences, then by pointed questions. The narrative of liberation clashed violently with the cold, hard facts of betrayal. At work, the shift was palpable. Sharon often came home visibly upset, recounting how colleagues had become distant, their greetings curt, their conversations hushed when she approached. She reported open criticism in the break room, thinly veiled remarks about professional conduct and ethical standards. The very environment that had enabled some of her liaisons now became a source of isolation. I continued to provide my attorney with detailed financial records, meticulously organized. Every expenditure from our joint accounts that aligned with a date, time, and location documented in the PI report was highlighted. Motel bills, restaurant tabs, gifts, even taxi fares, each was presented as direct evidence of her affairs and the misuse of communal funds. The financial impact, though not catastrophic, painted a clear picture of deliberate and deceptive spending. Sharon's attempts to discredit the PI's evidence proved largely futile. My attorney successfully argued the legality of the surveillance, citing my need to protect marital assets and, crucially, the welfare of our children. The court acknowledged the PI's thoroughness and the admissibility of his findings. Her legal position, once confident, began to erode. The custody battle intensified, becoming the central focus. I presented Sharon's reckless and secretive behavior, her frequent absences, and her repeated breaches of our agreement as evidence of her instability and a threat to the children's consistent, stable environment. The PI's reports, the timelines, the financial drains all painted a picture of a parent prioritizing personal gratification over parental responsibility. Sharon's attorney, after several contentious court dates, advised her to reconsider her stance. The weakness of her legal position was undeniable. The evidence was simply too strong, too comprehensive. She was being outmaneuvered, out-evidenced at every turn. The loss of support from mutual friends and community acquaintances was dramatic. People who had once admired Sharon's free spirit now saw her through a different lens. Invitations stopped coming. Casual conversations became strained. The small-town grapevine, once a source of mild amusement, became a judgment machine. She became increasingly isolated. My legal team initiated a comprehensive forensic accounting of all marital assets and debts. Every investment, every bank account, every piece of property, every outstanding loan was scrutinized. This was not just about equitable division. It was about exposing any hidden assets or liabilities that might have been accrued during her clandestine activities. Sharon's attempts to paint me as controlling or vengeful were systematically undermined by the sheer volume of clear evidence against her. My meticulous documentation, my calm demeanor in court, and the factual nature of the PI's report portrayed me as an individual seeking justice and stability, not retribution. Her accusations, lacking supporting evidence, simply failed to resonate. The court granted me a temporary order for primary physical custody of Lily and Mark. It was a pivotal moment. The children, though still troubled, seemed to find some solace in the immediate stability I offered. They moved their remaining belongings into the house, their familiar routines slowly beginning to re-establish themselves. Sharon's relationship with Chad visibly cooled under the public and legal pressure. The easy intimacy captured in the PI's photos was replaced by strained phone calls and hurried, discreet meetings. The fun, the excitement, had been replaced by the grim reality of legal consequences and public shame. With primary custody secured and Sharon's legal position significantly weakened, I instructed my attorney to prepare for an assertive and definitive divorce settlement strategy. The time for quiet observation and methodical evidence collection was over. It was now time for decisive action. The internal investigation at our shared workplace was swift and conclusive. Once my attorney provided the company with excerpts from the PI report detailing Sharon's misuse of company time and resources, HR acted without hesitation. The evidence of her diverting company car mileage for personal liaisons, extending lunch breaks into full afternoons for dates, and utilizing company phone lines for personal, non-work-related communications was undeniable. Sharon was called into a series of meetings, each one leading to a more severe outcome. First, a formal reprimand, then a demotion, stripping her of her managerial responsibilities and the accompanying salary. Finally, within weeks, came the termination. The official reason was gross misconduct and misuse of company assets. The news, though not unexpected to me, created a stark shift in her reality. Her sudden and significant loss of income profoundly impacted her financial stability. The salary that once supported her lifestyle, her new outings, and her increasing legal fees was gone. The immediate effect was a tightening of her budget, a scramble to cover basic expenses that had once been automatic. The consequences of her choices were no longer abstract. Brenda, who had been Sharon's most vocal supporter, finally severed ties. I heard through the grapevine that Brenda had been embarrassed by the public exposure and the growing scandal. "It's one thing to have fun," a mutual acquaintance relayed Brenda, saying, "but this is just a mess. I can't be associated with it." The remaining threads of Sharon's social network unraveled, leaving her exposed and alone. In the midst of this, Sharon made several tearful attempts to reconcile. She called late at night, left voicemails, even appeared at the house during times I was typically alone. "Dave, please," she would plead, her voice thick with desperation. "We can fix this. I made a mistake. I miss our family." Her pleas were emotional, raw, but my resolve remained unbroken. I saw not remorse, but a fear of consequences. The foundation was gone, shattered by her own hand. There was nothing left to fix. The children, too, played a part in her reckoning. During one of her supervised visitations, Lily, usually quiet, asked, "Mommy, why did you leave us?" "Mark, more direct, stated, "You lied about where you were going. We heard you fighting with Daddy." Their words, devoid of malice but full of genuine hurt, struck deeper than any legal document could. Sharon had no easy answers, no comforting lies left to offer them. My legal team wasted no time in using Sharon's professional instability as further evidence of her unsuitability for primary custody. Her inability to maintain gainful employment, directly resulting from her reckless behavior, painted a picture of someone incapable of providing a stable, consistent environment for the children. This argument resonated strongly with the court, reinforcing the temporary custody order. To cover her escalating legal fees and basic living expenses, Sharon was compelled to sell personal belongings. I saw ads for her antique jewelry on local online marketplaces, then for a small investment property she owned outright. The tangible assets she had accumulated, or once taken for granted, were now being liquidated, piece by piece, a direct consequence of her unraveling life. The presiding judge, a no-nonsense woman with decades on the bench, reviewed all submitted evidence during a pre-trial conference. Her demeanor was stern, her questions sharp and pointed. It was clear her leaning was strongly towards my claims, recognizing the overwhelming factual support I had provided. The tide had turned decisively. Sharon experienced a profound moment of reflection. I could see it in her eyes during court, a hollowness that hadn't been there before. The freedom she had so eagerly pursued had ultimately led to an isolating emptiness. The thrill of new experiences had been paid for with the destruction of her marriage, her career, and her reputation. The cost was becoming terrifyingly clear. She felt an intense emotional isolation, admitting to her attorney that she had no one left to turn to. Brenda was gone. Chad had distanced himself, unwilling to involve himself further in her legal and financial woes. Her casual acquaintances vanished. The support system she had built, or believed she had, dissolved, leaving her utterly alone. My meticulous documentation, compiled throughout the initial investigation, the journal entries, the GPS logs, the PI reports, the financial statements proved to be an insurmountable advantage. It was a clear, undeniable narrative of her actions, leaving no room for alternative interpretations or mitigating circumstances. Sharon's attorney, seeing the writing on the wall, strongly advised her to accept a settlement. "Any further proceedings will only prolong the public humiliation and increase your costs," he cautioned her. "The evidence is too strong. You will lose." I presented a final, non-negotiable settlement offer. It reflected the evidence, the legal outcomes, the primary custody arrangement, and the significant reduction in her earning potential. It was fair, legal, and firm. Sharon was left to grapple with the bitter reality of her drastically diminished and profoundly uncertain future. The court's final ruling was delivered with the cold, impersonal finality of legal pronouncements. It was overwhelmingly in my favor. Primary physical custody of Lily and Mark was awarded to me. The judge cited Sharon's proven instability, her documented absences, and her demonstrated prioritization of personal gratification over parental responsibility as key factors. Sharon was granted only limited, supervised visitation rights. These visits were to be pre-scheduled, held in public places, and subject to review. It was a stark reflection of the court's assessment of her fitness as a parent. The children's well-being was paramount, and her actions had clearly undermined their sense of safety and consistency. In the division of marital assets, the court also favored my claims. Given the evidence of her financial mismanagement and the expenditures tied to her affairs, Sharon received a significantly smaller portion of our shared wealth and investments. Her contributions were weighed against her documented misuse of funds. The outcome was equitable, not punitive, reflecting the facts presented. The family home, the place where the children had grown up, was awarded to me. This was a crucial point. It ensured their stability, a constant amidst the upheaval. Their rooms remained theirs, their routines largely undisturbed. It was a physical anchor in a suddenly turbulent world. Sharon's reputation, once a source of pride for her, was now irretrievably damaged. Within our community and her former social circles, the story had spread. The details, exaggerated in some tellings, but rooted in the painful truth of her actions, made her an object of pity, scorn, or sometimes quiet condemnation. The respect she once commanded had evaporated. Chad, her primary lover, disappeared completely. He had been transferred to an out-of-state office, a convenient escape from the social and legal repercussions that had consumed Sharon. He had moved on, leaving her to face the consequences alone, further cementing her isolation. Post-divorce, Sharon confronted the immediate, harsh financial strain of supporting herself. Without a job, and with a diminished share of the marital assets, she struggled. The apartment she found was small, impersonal, a stark contrast to the comfortable home she had once taken for granted. The cost of living, once easily managed, now pressed down on her with relentless force. After thorough consultation with a child psychologist, Lily and Mark explicitly chose to reside primarily with me. Their decision, made thoughtfully and without prompting, was another deep cut for Sharon. It was a direct consequence of her choices, a tangible manifestation of the broken trust. They preferred the stability and consistency I offered. Sharon attempted to rebuild her life, but found opportunities for meaningful employment scarce. Her reputation preceded her. New relationships, too, were difficult to forge. The whispers followed her. The judgment in people's eyes was apparent. The path forward was steep, and she walked it largely alone. I ensured the children received ongoing counseling. It was important for them to process the divorce, their mother's actions, and the profound changes in their lives. I wanted them to understand, to heal, to move forward without the emotional scars becoming permanent wounds. Sharon, I could see, felt a deep, cutting regret. The freedom she had chased had delivered not liberation, but devastating loss. The fleeting pleasures, the ego gratification, had come at an unthinkable cost. Her family, her career, her home, her reputation, and ultimately, her peace of mind. I exhibited no overt triumph. There was no joy in this outcome, only a quiet, weary sense of justice achieved. The chaos had subsided. The truth had been revealed. The necessary steps had been taken. It was the calm after a long, brutal storm. The final divorce decree was issued, a dense legal document that legally formalized the end of our marriage. It was the final chapter in our life together, marking Sharon's new, harsh reality. She moved her meager belongings into her small apartment. The sterile walls, the impersonal decor, the quiet solitude. It was all a profound contrast to the life she had once shared. The moral consequences manifested as an intense, pervasive loneliness, public disdain that permeated every interaction, and the irreversible shattering of trust, both hers in herself and others in her. Months had passed since the final decree, the legal papers having long since been filed away. Sharon, I observed through the children and the occasional public encounter, had plenty of time for reflection. She now often revisited the moment she had proposed the open marriage, the words hanging in the air, unaware of the precise, logical machine she had set in motion. The cold, analytical precision of my subsequent actions, from the surveillance to the court filings, was no longer a mystery but a stark, undeniable reality she finally understood. She now comprehended the profound extent of her moral compromise, the true, painful price of her fleeting desires. Meanwhile, Lily and Mark and I had settled into a new, stable routine in our familiar home. Their laughter, once hesitant, filled the rooms again. When I occasionally saw Sharon in public, perhaps at a school event, I offered a distant, emotionless nod, a silent acknowledgement of her presence, and nothing more. She would observe my unwavering dedication to the children, and I could sense the pang of profound loss that struck her. Her attempts to forge new connections were often met with the whispers of her past, making genuine bonds difficult. The thrill she had sought had vanished, replaced by a deep and pervasive emptiness. The children, slowly, visibly, began to heal, finding comfort in the steadfast security I provided. I, too, cautiously began to explore new relationships, doing so with quiet discretion, having learned the cost of naivete. A final, terse communication arrived for Sharon, a legal notice from her former friends, severing all remaining ties. She lived with the daily, tangible reminders of her choices, her small apartment, her isolation, the quiet judgment from the community. These were the unchangeable, enduring impacts. My actions, though painful, were a necessary, logical response to an untenable situation. The story ends with Sharon's quiet, cold realization of her self-inflicted fate, a stark, unvarnished consequence.